Welcome to Selling in the Age of AI.
Yeah, this is good stuff. So,
Must-listen podcast for sales professionals who lean into technology without leaning on it. Dive into the future of sales with your host, the dynamic and inspiring Frank Somma, renowned keynote speaker, best-selling author, seminar leader, and business coach. Get ready for game-changing insights and strategies that value technology but place humanity at the top of the sales pyramid.
Well, welcome everyone to Selling in the Age of AI, where we talk about the confluence of technology with the mastery of personal selling skills. I'm Frank Somma, and today my guest is Rick Trobman. Rick's the head of commercial effectiveness and transformation for DLL Bank. He is a senior executive with extensive international experience in the technology and financial services industries with over 20 years of proven success in strategic planning, commercial execution, team building, and leadership while delivering sustainable growth and profit. Rick has demonstrated ability to develop strategic plans and successfully integrate financing and payment solutions into the sales process and GTM for the world's most recognized technology companies, and provide organizational leadership for operational and strategic oversight, direction, and decision-making with executive accountability for formulating and implementing commercial strategies. Rick has a track record for establishing and maintaining a culture of commercial excellence, growth, innovation, and possesses expertise in building executive leadership teams, establishing clear long-term business plans, pro formas, P&Ls, and successfully delivering sustainable and profitable results. Well, who wouldn't want that? Welcome, Rick.
Thanks very much, Frank. Good to be here.
Good to see you. So, Rick, we're going to jump right in on our AI and sales topic, and I want to ask you, what do you imagine, or what do you know AI does well in sales, and where does it fall short compared to the human experience?
Yeah. Maybe I'll answer it in reverse order. I don't think AI sells well. So if the question is, what does AI do well in terms of sales? I think AI is a tool that can help make a salesperson better, but I don't think AI in itself can actually sell anything. And so where I see that it falls short is in any sort of interaction which requires intimacy, an understanding of how people respond psychologically, emotionally, how people may think of making a change, how that impacts them, right? And a very effective salesperson will recognize that when you're making a sale, you're actually asking somebody to do something tomorrow different than what they did yesterday with you. And I think that's a very personal experience. It requires an element of trust. So I don't think that AI does that well. What I think AI does do well is help prepare a salesperson to maximize every single opportunity that's in front of them.
Well, that's true. And I think it's important for salespeople to welcome those kinds of things. I can remember the initial push into something as old as a CRM, before that existed, and people that embraced it did much better than those that didn't. And even today, understanding what you can do with technology. So in your businesses, Rick, you've got salespeople out there in various capacities. Can you give us a little overview of kind of what your sales professionals are tasked with on a regular basis, and maybe we can tap into some of what they're doing?
Sure. So we're focused, as you know, Frank, primarily on vendor finance. So our job is to partner with some of the world's largest manufacturers, as well as their distribution channels, dealers, resellers, et cetera, of products and services, to attach a payment solution to the sale of whatever product or service that particular company is offering in the market. So make it easier for a customer to buy and consume the products and services that our partners are selling. That's our job. And the way in which our salespeople do that will depend on the different types of relationships we have. So at the highest level, we have our most senior international commercial folks that are engaged with our very large international manufacturers, most of which would be household names, very large companies. And then you have all the way down to the local level in the almost 30 countries where DLL operates, where we would have transactional salespeople that are really focused on the fulfillment in the local dealer space of what those manufacturers are trying to sell in those local markets. So we would have sales teams all over the world that would partner with dealers and the local representatives of a manufacturer to ensure that payments are attached specifically to those solutions. So that's in essence what they're selling, and we are structured geographically, but also more importantly by vertical markets. So our expertise really tends to be specific to the markets we serve. So construction, transportation, and industrial is one market segment. Healthcare, office equipment, and technology is another segment. Food and agriculture is another segment. And then lastly, our commercial finance business. So those elements of the company are where our people tend to have expertise in those markets. So they speak the same language as the folks that operate in those markets. And then we help make sure we know what point in the sale is the right point to insert a payment solution.
Wow, super interesting. I mean, there's so much that you said in there that I want to talk about. And part of it is, speaking the language of the customer. So that's, there's a couple of levels to that. Tell me what that, in your statement, what that means to you.
Yeah, especially in the role that I'm in now, what it means to me is the starting point for any sell needs to be meeting the customer where they're at, not where you want them to be. So we are putting tremendous effort into enabling our sales teams to have the information that's necessary so that they can demonstrate a knowledge of the partner's business that's just enough to open the door for a conversation that would allow them to figure out if and how they can support the partner or the customer in achieving their goals. So I think that that's the starting point for us is we are an enabler. So financing in and of itself for the companies we work with is not a value proposition. So we should always have the humility to recognize that we enable the sell of our partner, and in so doing, we hope to make a profit and grow. And so the starting point is, where are they? What is their strategy? What are their customer profiles that they're looking at? What are the challenges that they face? And then are there areas in which we can help them to overcome those challenges?
What's really interesting about your answer is that at the end of it, when you're describing what your sales process is, I guess, in meeting people where they are, you asked 5 questions in a row. And I wonder how many salespeople will pick that up and say, this is the sales process, right? You asked 5 questions in a row. If you went to a customer and asked each one of those questions, and then there would be sub questions, that would be what a sales professional does, right? I mean, that's the job, is to ask those questions to find out where somebody is, and then within those answers, see if there's a place that your solution can be an assistance to them.
Absolutely.
Right? Makes sense.
That's been my experience. That one of the challenges is we, I think by nature, salespeople, and I am a salesperson, we're sort of optimistic by nature. And that's a good characteristic when it comes to persistence. It has its Achilles heel. And I think the Achilles heel is, as optimists, we're oftentimes looking to hear what we want to hear. So when we engage with the customer, oftentimes what we're trying to do is get to the answer we want to hear as opposed to the truth. Right. And I think the best salespeople have learned over time how to distinguish between what they want to hear and the truth. Because the number of times in my career as a sales manager where somebody has told me they closed a deal because the customer liked the offer, I can't tell you how many times I've seen those deals blow up, right? I heard what I wanted to hear. The customer likes the solution.
Right.
But that is not the truth behind the truth. The truth behind the truth is, does that solution meet enough of the requirements that the customer will say yes and sign a contract, which is a completely different thing. So to your point, asking enough questions to make sure that you've uncovered all of the challenges that that partner or customer faces is the key to the whole thing. You must understand the entire situation if you are going to solve the problem for the customer.
Yeah, I mean, and that at the end of the day, that's really what we are, right? If they can do more with you than without you, then they need you. So it's important that
Yeah,
we are solving the problems.
I like it put that way.
You, you know who I learned that phrase from? You may know this guy from way back when. You remember a guy named Tony Codiani?
The name rings a bell, but I can't recall.
He was
No,
a
the name rings a
sales,
bell though.
yeah, he was a sales trainer way back when for Toshiba America. And he used to say when he trained sales managers, he would say to those sales managers, listen, if your team can't do more with you than without you, they don't need you. Getting guys to not just mail it in. But
Yeah.
it's that I've always thought of that with customers. It's how can I, demonstrably show an improvement in their systems, profits, ease of going to market, whatever it is. And it's got to be something that is obvious to both of us, or you're not going to go forward.
Yeah, and to your point, you don't know that unless you ask the right questions and enough of them.
Yeah, for sure. So, how do you think selling has changed from 2005 to 2025, or has it? Do you think it's similar, different, and in what ways?
I think it's very different in terms of expectations and what people are capable of doing now versus 2005. I think the fundamentals of sales remain the same. You talked about the 5 questions. I think the communication part, the one-on-one intimacy, the human connection, the providing the confidence to walk the customer through how a solution will benefit them remains the same. I think what's different and what salespeople should, adapt themselves to is the utilization of technology to become more effective and efficient. So what's different now is companies rightfully expect salespeople to be much more effective today than they were in 2005 because the opportunity to use technology to use your time more effectively is much more powerful today than it was then. You can use machine learning, data analytics, and AI to do everything from targeting to preparing for meetings to presentations to virtual assistants. All of those things that technology can help you to do will make you more productive and give you access to more opportunities. They won't close those deals. They won't get the customer comfortable with discomfort, but they can make sure that you don't spend too much time with the wrong partner or customer when you could be spending the right time with the right partner or customer.
That's really well said. So it's going to bring you more opportunities if you understand the technology and how to use it. It'll set you up to see more people, and you'll be more prepared when you get there, provided that you're a good study. But at the same time, you still have to get there, and as you said, make people comfortable with the moments that are not comfortable in the process. And I've said this to salespeople a number of times that that's what you're bringing today, right? I don't need you for information pretty much. I mean, nuance, yes, but Google's got you beat on information. So I know a lot about what I'm doing before you show up. I understand the information. The difference is going to be you're going to, why do I want you? I want you because you're going to shepherd me through the process. When things go awry, I'm going to be able to rely on you. So, and that comes from building a relationship, and I think that's like in your businesses, there's competition, yes?
Yeah, for sure.
Sure.
Lots
So,
of it.
right. So what makes, let me ask you the loaded question, right? So the differentiators, are they the relationships that your people in the field have with people as much as what your company does versus another? And kind of what's that mix? How does that work for you?
I think you need all of it. So we must be very precise with what value we bring to the market so that we can demonstrate that there's a reason to work with us.
Right.
In and of itself, that's not enough for somebody to either begin to work with us. It's enough to open the door. And it's definitely not enough to keep somebody working with us over time, which is where those relationships come into play. So to get somebody's interest, I think you have to have something of value to offer. To keep them in play, you have to have something of value to offer. But the only way that a customer becomes a valued partner, a valued customer, and a profitable and valued customer over time is through good sales people. So I think that that relationship element of it is something that we have a track record of doing well. We have salespeople in our organization who have been with the company for many, many years that have deep relationships that go back, in often cases, even for decades. And I think we place real value on that as being meaningful. Understanding the consequence of what we do on the partner experience and what it means for them, and then taking that personal. And I think we should, if we're salespeople, take personal the responsibility to do that. I think that's something at DLL that you find. People take real pride in the work that we do in collaborating to bring solutions to customers. And our salespeople are the tip of the spear in that experience. And they take very seriously their own personal reputations, as they should, but also the reputation of our organization.
So, Rick, thinking, about what you just said, that you have salespeople that have deep relationships, that some of them go back for decades. Would you say that that's a differentiator between what you do and what your competitors do, this appreciation of those people and those relationships?
I think it's a definitive differentiator in the sense that, first of all, a company that invests in its own people, the customer feels that experience, right? It may not be evident on the surface of it that if you create a positive culture where people feel good about what they do every day and they feel a commitment to their organization and the reputation of the company, that then translates in better customer experience. But I think that's very, very true. The culture of the organization that you work for matters, because if you identify with it and if it's something that's meaningful to you, that then gets conveyed to the customer. So you take seriously the commitment. If a customer has a bad experience, you would take that personal, and you would go out of your way, even if it's not your direct responsibility, to try to find a solution for that customer, or to collaborate to find a solution, or to find the right person to find the solution. And I think, to your point, in a company like DLL, because we've invested heavily in that culture and in maintaining our members, as we call them, over long periods of time, that then does result in those deeper and more meaningful relationships where people know they can trust and rely on us. And we're like any other company. We get it wrong and we make mistakes and we disappoint our customers. But I think more often than not, we respond well to that, to come in and fix the mistakes when we make them, and we own up to them and do the best we can to be responsive to the customer.
Rick, I love that you said take it personal, and I can't tell you how many sales trainings I have seen, been a part of, read about, watched, listened to, that say it's not personal. Rejection is not personal. Don't take it personally. And every sales trip, whether I'm doing a half-day seminar with a company or whether I'm up on stage doing a keynote, I bring this all the time. Sales is fiercely personal. And if you don't take it personally, you will not succeed. It's the opposite. It's not about this emotional separation between rejection and me. If I'm doing it at the highest level, I am the differentiator. The old adage, right? You sell yourself, you sell your product, you sell yourself, sell your product, company, and then you sell your product. This is very true in what you're saying. You've got people with decades-old relationships. They are the differentiator. And I've always felt that way, that if I'm going, whatever product I happen to be selling, I believe that I'm the difference. You can buy whatever I'm bringing in other places. I'm not the only purveyor. I haven't got a unicorn, right? So there are other people that do what I do. So what's the difference going to be? If I'm the person you're seeing, I need to make it me. And that makes it super personal. And I have to believe in my core that if you do business with someone other than me and the products that I have, it will be a lesser experience for you.
Yeah, I think it does need to come down to that sense of pride in what we do and believing in what we do. I think that the confidence in what you sell matters. And to the point you made earlier, those long-term relationships only work if you have the confidence to know that whatever you're selling, you can back up over time, right?
Yeah.
You don't You don't maintain relationships over long periods of time by continually disappointing your customers. Those don't last.
Right. No, of course, you have to have a good company behind you. But as you said, the salesperson is the tip of the spear. So you're not seeing my company yet. You haven't got the faith in them yet. I need you to establish that I've got this. I'm confident. It's going to be a great experience for you. And then the company behind me, of course, needs to be terrific at delivering a great experience to the client. And as you said, stepping up when there are mistakes and fixing, because things go wrong. It happens in every business. If Rick, if you were listening to the podcast today and you were 3 years into your professional selling career in whatever industry, what would you want to hear from Rick? Like what kind of advice? What are things that you think somebody should know today? What are the most important elements in being a successful professional salesperson?
Good question. I think the most important thing, I'm thinking of it from the standpoint I interview a ton of people, not as much in the last year and a half in my new role, but for years I spent lots of time interviewing people. And so the key thing I was looking for in salespeople was curiosity, right? Sort of first and foremost. So if you're new in sales, I think having a sense of curiosity is critical. And the reason why is you have to be interested in the customer. You have to be interested in the outcome. You have to be invested in their experience and what matters to them, even beyond what matters to you. And curiosity is the basis for that, because a customer can see right through, right? If you're only interested in playing the numbers game of maximizing your quota and getting to your number, and you don't care about them and their experience, there's just a sort of an instinct that most people have that would have a reluctance to truly open up to a person who is operating in that way. So I think the most critical thing if you're new in sales is take a genuine interest in curiosity in the people that you're courting to do business with, and demonstrate it through a fact-based approach to showing them that you understand their business. Do your research, know who you're talking to, do your best to understand their markets, their challenges, their customers, and listen. Ask questions and listen. So for me, that's what I'm sort of looking for when I look to hire salespeople. And if I were a newer salesperson, that would be the mindset that I think would be necessary for success.
Yeah. Curiosity is a big deal, and asking questions. You just said ask questions and listen. And I'm always amazed at it's not taught, right? If you go to, unless you're in, FSU's sales program or something, the normal college education doesn't include a listening class. And it's probably the most important aspect of being successful in business and in life, is the ability to ask good questions and then listen. And, for newer salespeople, I want to acknowledge that it takes patience. You think you've got to run at 100 miles an hour to make your number, but it's really better to bake the cake with hard to win ingredients than it is to get instant in a box. You're going to go further. So what Rick's saying, if you're asking questions and listen and taking your time and doing your research and understanding your client's business, yeah, it takes more time, but it makes a much more solid foundation. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I feel lucky. I imagine that you do as well, that I came up in sales through an organization that had a deep belief in discipline in sales, and that sales was a profession and a science and not an art. And they were quick to dispel any notions I had that the best salespeople were the ones that had the gift of gab. They were pretty hardcore. I worked for a company called Pacific Rim Capital, still around. Mark Mills was my boss. I'm still in touch with Mark. And Mark taught me the hard way that sales was a science, and that you needed to have a game plan and stick to it. And you needed to follow rigor and discipline to be successful in sales. And I think they just sort of like really got that into us. And I've carried that with me ever since. It was not an easy experience. My first 2.5 years in sales in commercial sales was a very, very challenging experience, but it set me up for the success and the career that I've had, because everything I did after that was based on a formula and it just worked.
Right. It's I definitely can relate. My first sales job was with Western Union Telegraph, and I went to the guy who was the former number one guy in the office I worked in, and he had gotten bumped up to HQ. And I asked if I could meet with him. I went up to HQ, and he was gracious with his time, and we had a sandwich together, whatever. And I said, if I were a marionette and you were the puppeteer, what would you have me do? I will do whatever it is that you tell me. I mean, the guy was the best, right? So tell me. And he said to me, go to every client that we've ever had in the territory and visit them face to face. And they're going to say to you, I'm not buying anything. He said, and your reply will be, that's okay, I'm not selling anything. Just here to introduce myself and get to know the place. And I did what he said. And invariably, I'd get back to the office after, Rick, we're talking about customers on green bar paper with a Hagstrom map, right? And do 10 stop bys and get back. And you'd have 3 messages about possible product needs and improvements and things that they wanted to change. So it was about doing the work. And I never forgot that either, that you can outwork and out hustle anybody to get to where you have to go while you're learning to be better at your craft.
Yeah. And I think it's necessary. You have to be willing to do that. You have to be willing to put in the hours. And I think the best salespeople over the longest period of time are the ones that are willing to put in the hours and the discipline to make sales a profession and a career, as opposed to a way to just make money quickly.
Absolutely. Now, you mentioned Mark as an early mentor. Are there any other kind of early in your career experiences that you can tap into to say, I learned a great lesson here, or this was a wonderful piece of training for me, or I learned never to do that again, or anything like that?
Plenty of them. Yeah, thinking of back, especially when I was new in corporate sales and working at Pacific Rim, and the 2 owners of the company at the time, and they've now sold part of it, and one is retired, David Mirsky. And in my business at the time, which was computer leasing, David Mirsky had a reputation of being one of the best closers in the business. And but he's also a sharp businessman. He was the owner of the company, so he sort of knew his stuff. But I remember I had an opportunity with a company to do a large Salesforce automation project and finance a bunch of laptops. And remember, this is a long time ago. Laptops were very expensive at the time. They were, I think, $5,000-$6,000 a piece. And it was a couple, I don't know, it must have been 500-600 of them. It was a relatively large size project at the time. So and I couldn't get that deal over the hurdle. And I was a young salesperson, and I thought I was putting everything out there right. So Mark said to me, well, let's go talk to Dave and see what Dave thinks. So I explained the situation to Dave and said, well, let's get the customer on the phone. So I arranged to have a call with the customer, and we get the customer on the phone, and I'm in the room, and Dave starts talking to them. And he's asking them questions like, tell me about your project, tell me about the typical user experience, tell me who the supplier is, tell me when you need to start. And I'm listening to this, and in my mind, as a 27 or 28-year-old salesperson, I'm thinking, this is a great closer. All you're doing is asking questions and then not saying anything. And then in the end of the conversation, he just basically repeated back to the customer. So you said that this is your project, these are your users, this is the technology, this is the supplier you're using, and this is when the project starts. Knowing that your project starts there, knowing that your supplier, and I know your supplier, takes this much time to deliver the product, I'm going to make sure you get those documents today because you have to sign them today and get them back to me because I'll never be able to meet your timelines and your personal commitments to this project if I don't get the PO out to that provider. So can you commit to me that you will get those documents back signed to me today if I send them to you? Oh, yes, I can. And I walked out of his office and I didn't even realize what had happened, right? Like I just didn't pick up on it. And it was natural to him because he was trying to understand the customer situation and solve for what they needed to have done. And he knew he could do it. So he had the confidence to do it. It wasn't a fake close to be able to win the deal. it was a way to ensure we captured the deal, but it was also a way to make sure that he solved the customer's situation.
Sure.
And sure enough, like that deal that I've been trying to close for a month, he closed in 15 minutes.
Right.
Yeah. So I had a lot of those experiences.
That's a wonderful lesson learned, because it's not, this is not Tommy Boy with Brian Dennehy and the martini, saying something slick, and then the guy says, "Okay, I'll give you the order tomorrow," And I think, unfortunately, as you thought, as a 27-year-old salesperson, too often the media has depicted this, silver-tongued devil as getting it done, and it's really the antithesis of what the best in the business do. They ask questions and listen. It's not about a slick response. Yes, you have to know your stuff. Sure, you've got to have answers from a deep store of knowledge because you spent the time to learn your client's business as well as your own. But it's about asking questions and filling a need, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And having the confidence
that's
when
true.
the time's right to ask for the order, right? Like if you know that you have what the client needs because you've identified that need and you have ensured that your solution fits it, you've confirmed that with them, then make sure you bring the deal home.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting because you have to find ways to do these things that work within your own personality. If you're bringing
Yes.
the authentic you to the table, it's super important. I've watched salespeople that have a completely different style from mine. I've had managers with a style that was much, much more forward than what I was ever comfortable with. And they would teach me, if I said to them, I remember one of my very first sales calls with my manager, and the guy said to me, "Well, Frank, this sounds fantastic. Great idea. I'm going to just talk to my whether it was wife, accountant, or something, and I'll give you a call back next Wednesday." I said, "Well, thank you very much." And I left, and manager, who was coaching me said, "You're not getting that deal." I'm like, "But the guy said he liked it. He said he'll call me on Wednesday." He said, "No, he just wanted to get rid of you." I'm like, "How do you know that? What was I supposed to do?" He go, "Ask him why he can't do it today." I'm like, "I could never. That's rude. But I had to learn, something that would work within my personality to say, why not do it now? I had to find the language that, that was fitting to that. Because you don't want to be rude, you don't want to be pushy, but the truth is that folks sometimes need to be prompted, or you need to ask that extra question to uncover that there's something you missed.
Yeah. I think it's critical that salespeople understand that the art of selling is in discomfort. If you're looking for comfort as a job, then you should definitely not be in sales, because it's not that you're trying to be rude, but before people say yes, they have to have that moment of discomfort where they disclose things to you they may not want to in order to get prepared to say yes. So you have to live, at least temporarily, in an uncomfortable zone with that customer to be able to get to that yes. As you said, in this situation, he was trying to protect his comfort by getting you out the door. And
Right.
Your manager was trying to say, no, you've got to ask the uncomfortable question so that you can get to the uncomfortable answer. Because as I said before, as salespeople, we're optimists. We want to hear what we hear. You heard what you wanted to hear.
I did.
Oh, he likes what I have to sell.
That was a done deal.
Yeah.
I had to learn over time to say, hey, listen, I understand that if I'm making a big decision, I would want to talk to my accountant as well. Understanding that if he agrees with this, I just want to know, do we have a deal to do?
Yeah.
Are we good to go? Oh, yes, we are. Okay, so why don't we do this? Let's sign this over here. We'll date it for next Thursday when you're going to see your guy. Whatever I did in the moments, depending on what I was selling. But it was always about solidifying the agreement now because, like you said, it's weirdly uncomfortable. Nobody wants to be, I shouldn't say nobody, but many of us don't want to be thought of as being too pushy and fulfilling that stereotype because folks are expecting that. So it's kind of magnified when you do a little bit of it because depending on their personality, they may be waiting for it as well, and you've got to be able to read the situation and come up with the right approach to help that person get to a place that's good for them and good for you.
Yeah, nuance matters. Nuance helps. You have to adapt to that situation and do it in a way that is going to keep the customer from shutting down as well.
Yeah.
Right. So if you make somebody so uncomfortable that they just put the wall up, you're definitely not going to help them or help yourself.
Rick, that brings us right back to the beginning, right? With the nuance and that why AI can't sell. And it's that. It's seeing the facial expression. It's watching the deep breath. It's seeing the retreat, from the conversation. There's so many little things that we pick up. We don't even know we're picking them up, right? If you're very good and very experienced and you're reading somebody, you're not saying to yourself, gee, as I'm talking, this guy is subtly nodding his head. You just know that you're in a good place of rapport. You know what I mean? You're not,
Yeah.
it's like I often say, if I'm driving my car and a cat runs across the road, I don't say, oh, gee, there's a cat. Let me lift my foot off of the gas pedal and put it on the brake pedal and depress it so I don't hit this cat. I just do it. That's mastery, right? So that's where we want to be as salespeople. We want to be in as many face-to-face situations, whether they be via computer or whether they be, really in person, and be able to read somebody. There's a wonderful study that I read out of Cornell University where the professor, and her name is not jumping into my brain right now, hopefully it will, but she had sent people out with a minor ask. And she sent one group out to ask via email and the other group out to ask via phone call. And the phone call group outperformed the email group 66 to 33%. And then she took that same successful phone call group and sent them out with the same ask against a group that went out in person. And again, the group that went out in person, double digit, surpassed the group on the phone, proving that the hierarchy of human communication is A, in person, B, by phone, and lastly, via these easily misunderstood communications that are so necessary, text and email, right? So necessary, but easily misunderstood. So, you just start reading somebody, reading the room, understanding the nuances. This is where we come in and AI has to exit, yeah?
And I think it's where we can leverage AI to make that first point of contact high enough impact so that you can get the customer's attention, right? Because one thing that is much more difficult today than in 2005 is getting a customer to pick up the phone, being able to knock on a customer's door and go see them, right? The world has changed. That's much more difficult.
True.
So where AI can be helpful and what we're using it for today is training our salespeople how to create really effective prompts in utilizing AI to do research on their prospects. So long before they pick up the phone, long before they send an email, long before they go see somebody in person, they understand that customer situation to the absolute best of their ability, so that when they make that first contact, it can be as high impact as possible, leading to the opportunity to open that door. Because it is just that much harder to find those prospects today. So your goal, in my opinion, should be, how can you as quickly as possible demonstrate that you understand their situation so you give them a motivation to speak to you? And that's where I think AI does play a big role.
Yeah, that's a huge point. Well, as we start to wrap up, I don't want to keep you all night. I mean, for those of you, I don't think we mentioned it on the recording, but Rick is in Spain. So it is evening, and I'm sure getting near dinner time. And so we'll wrap it up. Rick, anything left that you'd like to give us as a parting comment? Anything that we haven't touched that you think you'd like to bring up now?
Yeah, Frank, I just want to thank you for your time. Thank you for your service and bringing this to people, all the work that you've done over the years in terms of your speaking engagement, your coaching, your writing. And, I worked with you when you were a salesperson. I know that DLL and my group has used you in particular for speaking engagements, and it's always been a pleasure. So thanks for the honor of inviting me to speak with you.
Oh, boy. No, the honor is mine, my friend. Thanks so much for taking the time out. I really appreciate it. Thanks so much, Rick. Rick Trobman, everybody, from DLL, great wisdom. I hope you enjoyed today's podcast.
Ready to take your sales team or event to the next level? Visit franksomma.com to discover how Frank can coach your top performers, deliver a tailored workshop for your team, or captivate your audience with a content-packed keynote at your next event. Frank's best-selling book, B2B is really P2P, is now available on Amazon and Frank's website. Here's a special offer. As a valued listener, mention this podcast when you contact Frank and receive a 10% discount on your first coaching session, keynote, or workshop booking.
That's a wrap. Thanks so much for tuning into this episode of Selling in the Age of AI. Be sure to check out the show notes for links to all of the topics we discussed, and of course, to connect with our amazing guests. I have to shout out big love to my production team, Neeks, Angelo, Nico of Digital Presence. You guys rock. If you want your digital presence to explode, check these guys out at digitalpresence.team. And until next time, remember, people can't point and click you. Be the difference maker for your prospects and clients.